first ceremony showed me more and more and more of my ancestral pain and what I carried. And I was shown who I was in my past life and the sadness that I carried in that previous life. And I left every ceremony, no physical pain, no inflammation, and went off 6 of my 8 medications, one including an anti-anxiety depression medication, which is huge. And I had little or no desire to grab a drink or smoke weed or do any of that. It's like for the first time, I could sit with it, just sit with it.
Okay, the next person that I'm going to talk to cannot reveal her identity. She can't show her face. But thank you so much for coming on. I was hoping that you could tell us why you can't reveal your identity.
Yes. I work in the medical industry in Western medicine, and I am apprehensive about kind of going too public about this at this point because I feel like there's still a stigma with plant medicine, and so I just asked to remain anonymous just for this um, interview together.
Yeah, totally understandable. And I mean, for people who have experienced major breakthroughs using plant medicine, it's an unfortunate reality that we have to live in. Have you ever had a positive conversation with any colleague about plant medicine?
Yes, I had a supervisor that reached out to me recently, and we discussed how I go on these retreats once a year, and I always tell them they're wellness retreats. Never obviously go into the details of it. So he had been open with me about mental health issues, depression, and I kind of walked the plank a little bit and tested the water. And I said, okay, I'm going to tell him about the retreats and what ayahuasca has done for me and plant medicine. And so I mentioned it to him, and he had mentioned that he had been looking into it himself. And so that gave me kind of a little relief inside that I could be a little bit more open about it since he'd already had looked into it, which was surprising to me. So you feel like sometimes the community can be small, but you don't realize how many people are interested in it. So I gave him all of the information of where I went to as far as the organization, the retreat, and how it benefited, what my benefits were for me as far as my chronic illness and autoimmune. And so he definitely was open. And like I felt at the time, you can't really, you want to be very gentle about approaching people with these types of conversations and topics because it has to be something that they want to do and they have to be called to it. It's not something you want to force upon somebody as far as um, telling them, oh, you must go, or this is definitely for you. I mean, it has to be something that it's there is a calling. They have to be called to it, to the medicine.
And what would you imagine conversations would be like that are negative in or that are against plant medicine in your line of work?
Well, I mean, it's the first thing that people would go to in the Western medicine, uh, world would be, what could be the side effects? Is it, how is it controlled? I mean, how is it made? How do you know that's not going to be, there's going to be any kind of negative um, outcome physiologically, mentally from it, as far as it being monitored. So, what it can do to you long term, short term, how many studies have been involved. So these are all, that's conditioning, of course, that's how everything goes in medicine. Western medicine is how much has this been studied and what is the outcome. And Um, what are the side effects? So, what is the ironic part about that is if you watch TV and you see a new prescription medication that's going to be introduced, I'm sure you all hear the very little details at the end, right? May cause
Mm.
suicide, may cause, such and, it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like, why would you want to take something that
Yeah.
may cause suicide? So, the irony is they're so involved in what could happen to you afterwards, but yet if a doctor prescribes it to them, they're ready to pop it in a second. Oh, okay. Yeah, I may not be
Yeah.
able to see again, but at least I won't have any liver
Yeah.
issues. So that would
Um.
be, I think, the
Mhm.
the general conversation with somebody in that industry.
What is autoimmune disease?
So autoimmune disease is when the body's immune system attacks the body's cells, so your body attacks itself, and that's called autoimmune disease. So as of current 2024, there's over 100 autoimmune diseases. Um, so there's rheumatoid arthritis, Graves' disease, Hashimoto's, lupus, MS, diabetes, IBS, celiac disease, Sjorren's syndrome, Crohn's disease, over 100. That's just some of the main ones that people hear about on a regular basis. Um, so each autoimmune can affect one organ or the whole body, and like lupus can affect the whole body. 80% of people that are diagnosed with autoimmune are women, so that's really interesting. And then I had a rheumatologist who started out early on, and he was quite a bit older. He was retiring towards the end when I was seeing him, was being treated by him. So he had mentioned, oh, when I started in 70s, there was, and so there was like 30 or 40 autoimmune diseases in 1974. I had to look that up after he told me because I was so curious. And then as of 2024, there's more than 100. So the autoimmune diseases have just, I mean, it's there's way more than there ever has been. And that's only in what, 30, 50 years, right? So, most of the Western medicine, rheumatologists, endocrinologists, they are the two specialists that you see with autoimmune. And they believe that collectively that most autoimmune disease is caused by bacteria, genetics, environmental exposure, pesticides, mercury, smoking, air pollution, diet, gut, and then drug use. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a big new topic with a lot of people with autoimmune because they've had studies where they said that PTSD may cause changes in your immune system and increase the risk of autoimmune disease. So, um, long-lasting stress-related disorders such as PTSD may increase your risk of autoimmune disease, which is really very interesting to me. And that they've been exploring that connection between stress and autoimmune for since about 2020, I believe.
And which type do you
I
have?
have Hashimoto's disease, which is it's a autoimmune disease of the thyroid, and it's the hypothyroidism that turns into autoimmune disease when it's progressive. Like mine had been undetected for so long that it my body started attacking my thyroid, and I went from a pretty healthy 48-year-old fit person with no health issues, and that changed because as far as my health, I've been relatively healthy most of my life and was fit and didn't have any health problems. And then in my 30s and 40s, I started having this weight loss issue where I couldn't keep weight on. And I started losing hair and having tremors, and I had a really hard time functioning. I had a lot of anxiety, and I went to doctors, and it was dismissed as hormones or stress or my divorce, and they would not give me any referrals to specialists, and it just seemed to be this ongoing just torture. And then by the time I was in my late 40s is when I started to have weight gain, and then I had all this inflammation that caused a bunch of nerve damage, and I had a hard time walking and moving joints, and all of this inflammation just became unbearable. So then I was given the opportunity from a doctor that luckily knew what I was dealing with. And I went to a rheumatologist and was diagnosed with Hashimoto's at that time.
Mm. Are all these symptoms effects that you could attribute to the thyroid?
Yes, I mean, I had fatigue, joint stiffness, pain, swelling. Um, I had skin problems, mood disorders, the tremors, heart palpitations, digestive issues. I think I mentioned skin problems as well. The joint stiffness and fatigue obviously were the big part of it. So when you go to a specialist, they could dismiss these for females, especially as hormonal type of, depending on your age, perimenopause or menopausal symptoms, premenopausal symptoms. So it could be dismissed. And then as far as a specialist is concerned, a rheumatologist, they'll go the extra step. They can test your antibodies, and that's how they determine whether it's an autoimmune. So when they did the sonogram, they were able to see my thyroid was like Swiss cheese, and it was being, my own body was attacking it. So they were able to diagnose it and treat me with Synthroid medication management. So it just basically replicates your thyroid, and it helps you have more energy and to function better. And it's supposed to help you with your inflammation, which it didn't really. And the unfortunate part is they do lab testing quite frequently, and they tell you that you're in range, you're healthy. Oh, you look great on range. And then you just feel like death, and you could barely move. And you hit your head on the wall because you're like, okay, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I'm taking the Synthroid. I'm going to a specialist. I'm eating clean. I'm trying to rest more often to keep my stress level down, but ultimately I don't feel better. And one of the rare complications with this disease is thyroid storm, which is when the thyroid gland releases a large amount of the thyroid hormone in a short period of time. And it's a rare complication, but it's something that can be very life threatening, and you tend to have panic attacks during that time. And I would have such terrible thyroid storms that my heart would just beat so rapidly. And like I talked about earlier about comorbidity with different autoimmune diseases, and Hashimoto's with the hypothyroidism can result in like a poor heart function and enlarged heart. So you have to really be very cautious of that, because you can have heart failure.
When did you first hear about the medicine?
So I first heard about it while I was living in South America. I grew up part of my childhood and teen years in Argentina, and ayahuasca was a common medicine used to assist with addiction recovery, depression, and chronic illness. But I mean, it wasn't just a medicine. I mean, you went to a retreat to Peru or Colombia, and you were seen by a shaman and participated in a ceremony that was obviously indigenous for centuries. So that was really a common um, practice there. So that's when I first heard about it. But one of my family members brought up possibly trying ayahuasca around 2022, when I was having a really hard time moving, walking, uh, even working. I was having difficulty even keeping my job at the time. So I had a lot of flare-ups, and the medicine called me when I was reading about a shaman's bio for an organization that was conducting ceremonies. And his work was described as a medicine healer that based on his healing of the spirit, mind, and heart. And I immediately was called to it. There was like this voice inside of me that spoke to me, telling me that my spirit and my heart needed healing, and I got to take that journey. I got to make that journey happen to heal. I was pretty, I don't want to say desperate. That's a really, I don't like to use that word so much, but there was a level of desperation because I felt like my whole world was completely falling apart because I wasn't going to be able to continue working. I physically could not move very well, and I was obviously I was in fear of being, handicapped and permanently. So I believe that my mother Aya kind of called me to sit with her at that time, and I just felt that kind of need and desire all at once to be there. And my first ceremony was in the United States in Southern California with Taita Pedro Davila, and just reading about him and knowing him and meeting him, he's a generational shaman, um, curandero, yajecero. We talk about different titles, taitas, they call them taitas in South America. I think it comes from different regions. I'm not certain for sure, but um, he's from Putumayo, Colombia, and he has pretty much 20 years of experience in South America, US, and Europe. So I felt like I was called, and that voice spoke to me, and then I saw myself participating in 6 ayahuasca ceremonies within a 2-year period.
And can you tell us about your experiences?
Yes. The first one is always the one I'm most, it's the one that's the clearest to me. It's like the most profound. That was in Southern California. It was a beautiful property. I sat with 48 souls, approximately 8 facilitators. The first ceremony was only 1 cup for me, and it activated quite quickly. I knew, like I mentioned, it was just, I knew my third eye was open, and was I was ready to go. My pineal gland was most certainly not calcified. I had to sit in a room and listen to bellowing and guttural purging and moaning for over 6 hours, and didn't really know I didn't know what to expect, but that first ceremony stood out for me because it was like a symphony of pain. It surrounded me, it circled me. I had to sit and listen to that pain. And then Mother Aya spoke to me and said, "You want to know what the real world is truly about? Well, I'll give you what you asked for. I'm going to show you the pain of humanity, and I'm also going to show you unconditional love and joy." And that was my introduction to, I guess, what we call the true meaning of duality, which I never really was conscious of before. I believe now I know exactly what it is. And I sat with my legs crossed because I felt like as if I sat up rather than laying down like other people were doing, that I was less vulnerable. I mean, we can't just automatically be in ceremony and change our habits, right? So I sat there with my legs
Mm,
crossed. I'm sure you can agree that everybody's got like their form of what protects them. I saw women that were
mm,
laying down in a fetal position, and I thought to myself, oh, I could not do that. I would be vulnerable. So I felt if I
mm-hmm,
sat with my legs crossed and sat up straight, that I would be less vulnerable. And I felt my body like move for the first time with like ease, and there was this fluidity, and I didn't feel pain. And then I felt my arms kind of reaching out, and I suddenly had this ability to move all the energy in the room, and I could take my arms and move everything, and I was weightless for the first time. I mean, in years, I could feel my body. I could actually be inside my body, and I became part of this the galaxy and cosmos, and I was one with everything and nature and this collectiveness with humanity. And I was just like, everyone was a part of everyone, and I was shown all that pain of all my ancestors through their eyes, and I wept uncontrollably. And while I wept, like all of these blasts of light would just pass through me that physically threw me back, and I felt like this unconditional love and joy for the first time in my life, like real pure joy, this white light. And I mean, I just remember going, oh my gosh, this is joy. This is what it feels like. And I felt
Mm.
the duality in this realm, and those who caused me pain, and how to forgive myself, and to understand what all that trauma I went through growing up, and being raised by these loving parents who had so much love and gave me so much love, and yet they were so damaged and by their own trauma. And then it just brought me into this light, and there was just like all of this knowledge that just, they're human, just they're flawed. They're like humans, just like everybody else is flawed. And I felt this weight just carry my whole weight of that I've been carrying my whole life. This weight, it just lifted, and I faced fear for the first time, instead of having to grab a drink of alcohol or smoke weed or do anything that I could do to avoid the pain through addictive behavior. I mean, that was my go-to. Like, if something was bad, I had to get rid of it right away. I had to run from it. So I realized that right then and there, I was sick. I was like, my soul was sick. And every ceremony after that first ceremony showed me more and more and more of my ancestral pain and what I carried. And I was shown who I was in my past life and the sadness that I carried in that previous life. And I left every ceremony, no physical pain, no inflammation, and went off 6 of my 8 medications, one including an anti-anxiety depression medication, which is huge. And I had little or no desire to grab a drink or smoke weed or do any of that. It's like, for the first time, I could sit with it, just sit with it.
Hausch, that is beautiful. Oh my gosh. These kind of conversations, they give me
Do they?
goosebumps just to hear about this kind of healing, this kind of potential for our brothers and
I
sisters.
like to hear about your experiences
um,
too, because I mean that's part of the part of it where it
mhm,
feels like, how you have this connection when I mean, I assume that you've been at a ceremony where you've actually had
mhm.
people discuss their experience. Have you had that happen where they've talked to each other after ceremony? Yeah.
Yes,
How did
absolutely.
you feel
Yes,
about
for
that?
sure.
Did you feel like knowing what other people experience, did it help you at all, like as far as integrating your own experiences?
Yes, yes, for sure. Um, and even though ayahuasca is so diverse, meaning like I guess you know, yeah, every time you take it, it's going to be different. Every person who takes it's going to be different for them. And they say that you will have an experience that not only, well, Terrence McKenna says you'll have an experience that not only is unique for you, but that nobody else has ever had,
Yeah,
ever.
exactly.
That's what they say about it. And for me, I mean, so I had to relearn how to walk due to a brain hemorrhage. And so for me, the thing is like my brain was technically damaged. And after using ayahuasca, the craziest thing happened. I felt that I could walk better. And I was like, why? So I started researching this, and to me, it's like, it sounds too good to be true. But it makes so much sense, especially if you read the research about neuroplasticity. It makes too much sense, and it just feels like a system update for me. It's like the whole mental um, construction of the physical world for me is updated after I have one of these experiences. And so I'm more accurate when I take a step. Whereas before I might stumble a tiny bit, But yeah, just amazing things, and so it's really changed my life. And I'm super into that neuroplasticity element because when you think about it, neuroplasticity is just such a huge, um, I don't know how to say it, a representative of the medicine. It's just like when you think about the fact that this medicine does promote neuroplasticity, there's so many things that explains, and I'm not trying to explain away the magic and the mystery of the medicine, which will always exist. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful part of it. But there is something that's real. There is something that's not woo woo that is happening. There is something that is medical and that can help people. And that's why I've been obsessed with it now for ever since I discovered that years ago.
Oh my gosh. That's life-changing.
So I'm in love. I'm in love with it.
Improved your quality
Did
of
you like
life. I
the
mean, how could you not, you know?
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. Um, uh, how would you describe the style of the Taita? And did you like him?
Yes, I guess because of the fact that I lived in South America, um, I felt like a comfort being with someone that is from South America, an indigenous man from South America, and because I lived there, and then I was raised by a stepfather who was Latin, and then because he does speak English, but he does a lot of his when he does speak in ceremony, he has a translator because he feels more comfortable in his native language. So I felt like kind of connected in that aspect because of my experience living in South America. Plus, I felt like he had this level of like, he was very, very kind and gentle and in the way he spoke to people, and he gave people an opportunity prior to ceremony. If they had something they wanted to speak to him about, like in private prior to the ceremony, that he would give them that time and they would sit with him and, express like what their concerns were and what their intentions were, at that ceremony, um, and help them process that part of it and go into the ceremony with a lot of, insight as far as like what they're looking to receive from the medicine. So I felt like he, had that level of empathy that, was necessary to make people feel safe when they're there because safety is everything, especially when you're doing something that you're not sure how you're going to act or feel. And these are strangers. So I felt that he had that capacity, that warmth, that had that connection that not everybody really could have, so there was something very special about him. And, like I said, there's a maestro, taita, all these different titles. And, the maestro is the conductor and like I said, it could be literal, it could be, he is the conductor, he moves the energy, he is the person that's in that ceremony that's literally moving the energy around and can read what's going on and heighten the energy, lower the energy, and, introduce the music because the music's integral, at least in our ceremonies they were integral, part of
Mm.
the ceremony. And so I feel like that's a huge part of what the shamans presence is in that ceremony, is to not only help you heal, but to help you through the process. And and that's what I felt with him. I felt he had that special gift.
In the time after your experiences, what has integration been like for you?
It's been hard because it's like one ceremony could take up to a year to process because you have all these little bits and pieces, these fragments that come back into play, and you don't remember them 2 months later, and then 6 months later they'll come back and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't remember that. And wow, that was heavy. And as far as the integration process and why I think integration coaches are really important, um, is that it is layered and you're going to have a long period of time that you have to you know implement all of these types of thoughts and experiences and everything, and then you have to go back to the real world. And like Taita would say, after the end of the ceremony, you discovered something, a different realm and different feelings and emotions and unravel things about yourself. And yet you still have to go out in the real world and be part of the world, and you're not in the matrix, and you have to go out there and make a difference and, be a giving, loving person and, give and receive and try to make a difference in people's lives and, take what you learn here and try to make the world a better place. So, that part of integrating into society. So it could be tricky because you come out of these ceremonies and you're like, whew, and like this weight's off of you and you're like, I felt very free. So I would be in public, and I live in a place like, Las Vegas. So, it's not the friendliest town to live in. And so it's hard to be in the real world and, be on that level with people and try to, uh, you see things differently because you feel like you're part of this collectiveness more than you are just this individual. Um, and you could see things in people's eyes that I couldn't see their eyes before. I could see people's eyes, but now I could look in their eyes and I could see things. I could see more of what a person is, soul, spirit, energy. And I had to really be careful about how much I stayed. I isolated more after than I used to because I've been a little bit more receptive to energy, or more, I want to say, like, sensitized to it. I was more sensitive to it because when I would be around people before, I would feel something, but I wouldn't really be able to tell. And now, after the ceremonies and after taking the medicine, I could feel energy like I've never had before, whether it's good or bad, and it could deplete me. And so I had to learn more about self-care and not associate that with being self-absorbed or being selfish, and learning boundaries, learning how to protect my energy, as well as, when I do feel that energy, when it's a good time to go or stay. And that was part of the integration part where I had to really be cognitive of how different I was in the world. Like I was a different person.
Mm. Oh, wow. Thank you for that. I think that will help a lot of people who are also going through similar processes, trying to figure out how best they can um, conduct their energy in their lives as they transform to the next part of their lives. Um, what hurdles do we face in integrating the use of this medicine into society?
Oh, it's complicated because I mean, I believe it can improve, like with my condition, it can improve psychological well-being and overall physical well-being. There's a connection there. And I think the challenges are definitely, we have a medicine that's been used by indigenous people for in the Amazon for centuries. And then there's been these comprehensive global surveys, reviews, studies on ayahuasca and the therapeutic potential, with mounting evidence of potential benefits in depression, anxiety, substance abuse, disorders. And I don't think that there are so many sound studies, and I don't think it's something that could be dismissed, but I do think that there is progress. You can go on Science Direct and different sites, and you could see a lot of the therapeutic reviews that they have, the reviews about therapeutic potential of ayahuasca and what it can do. And I think the drug policies in the U.S. In the U.S. it's currently illegal. DMT is a Schedule One drug under the United States, in the United States and of many countries, and you could use it for religious use in almost all states. And then some of the states have made it legal, like Colorado, Oregon, DC, and Washington, but Western Europe still. it's illegal in many countries. And I think that what will what it will take to get it to a level where it's more, well received and used, um, and not become it's become less of a stigma now because there's more people that are coming out about using it and the benefits. But I think that we're going to need more advocates like yourself on social media. We're going to need people that are going to provide sound evidence through interviewing people of all walks of life and their experience with medicine, and to kind of give people an opportunity to express like all of the benefits from it. But as far as, legislation, I mean, they're trying to decriminalize psychedelics in California. There's more scientific research. There's medicinal potential with psychedelics. And if it's ever going to be more accessible, I would think that the FDA and the US have to face the fact that, there are other ways of healing. And I think those studies will definitely provide a lot of outcome and a lot of people to open their eyes to see that it is something that's healing and can help people. Like I said, we've seen people that have had chronic illness, they've had mental health issues. We've seen, people that have had, just addiction issues, the PTSD, everything I've seen that people have come to the ceremonies to help their quality of life. And I just would like to think that it's not just the religious liberty that is part of the United States that would make it legal, that it would be just the outcome of all the medicinal potential it has. And that's what I believe. But I do believe that it should still be considered a sacred medicine, and that it should be facilitated
Mhm.
through a shaman as part of a ceremony.
Mm, mm. I pray for the day when I can stand tall and proud and be who I am without fearing being legally prosecuted for wanting to heal. Um, yeah, I think it's just horrible. Any advice for those who are scared to take the plunge?
Yeah, I think it's just human nature. If you're not if the unknown is always going to make you a little bit hesitant, there's always that unknown. And I was obviously very apprehensive in the beginning, and still I was very nervous the first time I went. I think that's normal. Um, but I think that if you can get past that point, like if you're called to the medicine, that means you're at a point in your life that you are looking for significant change. You're looking for something um, that's profound to change in your life, and and most of us are adults and we know what works and what doesn't, and what's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting, different results. It's just, if you've tried everything like I did, I mean, I went to specialists, I did everything they told me to do, taken a ton of medication, and I was still a very sick person. I think that you have to, you know, be able to have that talk with yourself that you are there and it's calling you because you're at a point in time where you feel that you need to do something to heal. And um, if you can get past that point and just not try to overanalyze it or try to use the ego by saying, oh well, I don't know how what's gonna happen when I go. If you can get past all of those thoughts and just go there with the good intentions, with the intentions of healing and trusting, and knowing that you're going to come out on the other side as someone that's just better and more improved, and you're going to see things differently, you're going to feel things differently, and that you're going to have um, a different look on life. And ultimately, that could help you in so many facets of your, real everyday life, as far as being a healthier person, having healthier relationships, having a healthier, um, just relation with things that maybe you dealt with addiction, and things that you don't really need to have anymore as coping mechanisms, and that you can actually be part of something that's bigger than anything you've ever been a part of before. And I think if you can get past all of the, the fears of just not knowing, I think it can be profound. And that's what I did. That's what I had to face before I went and took the plunge.
That's a beautiful testimony, and no doubt it helps move collective human consciousness forward. So I thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about it, because I feel like it's still something that I don't talk to everybody about. Um, Still one of those things where, I'm very selective about who I speak to about it. So you gave me a voice, which is something that a lot of people with autoimmune diseases need to have a voice. So thanks for that opportunity. It means a lot to me.